Hey, what's up, Heat fans? It's your host, MA, bringing you another episode of Heat Blogspot. How you guys doing today? Today is Wednesday, November 11th. I'm currently in Tampa Bay and experiencing Hurricane Eta, whatever they're calling it now. It's a Greek name now. And it's not really that bad, but you might hear some wind, you might hear some rain, you might hear, thunder maybe, you might hear a dog whimper, but I'm okay. So thank you guys. Thank you very much for joining me today. Today is a special episode, but first let me say thank you again. It's been awesome so far. You guys are still coming with the comments, still coming with the views, still coming with the likes. It's been great. It's really helping these videos get out there a little more. So thank you guys so much from the bottom of my heart. I really appreciate it. Please don't forget to follow, like, subscribe, even on Facebook and Twitter if you can. I greatly appreciate it at Heat Blogspot. And if you ever want to, just email me, heatblogspot@gmail.com. More than welcome to, guys. More than welcome to. But whatever. Let's get all that out the way. Now, let's talk about what we came here to talk about. And today, I just want to talk about the Heat trade history. And really, when I say Heat trade history, I mean Pat Riley's trade history and how he's done things since taking over for the Heat as president of basketball operations since '96. He's back then he was the head coach too, but now he's just the president of basketball operations, so whatever. But the reason I want to bring that up is because in exactly 1 week, basically, we're going to have the NBA draft. And then guess what? 2 days later, we're going to have NBA free agency start. And starting November 22nd, they can start signing contracts. And really on the 18th means then everyone can start trading. And so by next week, we can start talking real trades happening. And a month later, December 22nd, it's the first game of the season with training camp on December 1st. So it's a roller coaster. The Heat have only gotten 2 months off. So have the Lakers since the finals. We're going to be really tired. And I don't know what's going to happen. And I wonder how Pat Riley's going to do his thing. And that's why I'm doing this episode, because I'm going to look back to the history of Pat Riley and seeing what he's done with the Heat. And, maybe we can all figure out in our heads, project what he might do. Because I think a trade's going to happen. And this might show us what route he might take to get there. So, let's start off talking about his first time coming to Miami. It's 1996. That's the offseason. He just came from the Knicks. The Knicks had Patrick Ewing, John Starks, Derek Harper, some old school heavy hitters, Anthony Mason, and they played a really rugged, tough defensive game. And I think he just kept doing that. It was the 90s still, and that was kind of the way they played basketball anyways. So he comes into the Heat, and the Heat have no real stars other than Glenn Rice. He ends up trading Glenn Rice. His first thing he does, he trades Glenn Rice for Alonzo Mourning. Yep, Alonzo Mourning comes to the Heat in 1996, and it was a pretty wild trade at the time. And I wasn't really, knowing what was going on. I won't lie here, but it was definitely a game changer because Alonzo Mourning was a huge name. Big. The guy was an all-star in Charlotte. They were doing a good run because he had Larry Johnson and Muggsy Bogues, and I believe they had, I forgot who their shooting guard was now at this time, but whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm not a Hornets fan anyways. But Alonzo Mourning was the real deal. The guy was second pick behind Shaquille O'Neal in the 92 draft, and he's been a dominant force ever since. Not as dominant as Shaq, but he was Alonzo Mourning. He was blocking people, making clutch shots, and doing all the things you want a big man to do. And we end up trading him for just pretty much all we did was lose Glenn Rice in the first round pick. And it was great. So the Heat start, and that's how Pat Riley starts his whole tenure here with the Heat. He goes for a big fish. All right. So this tells you already that I think Pat Riley's strength, especially since the Heat, is trades. He gets what he really wants in trades, and then he builds around that. He's gotten lucky recently on the draft, and then back in '03. But when you really think about the draft, other than that, can you really think of other draft picks that ended up being as good as this? The only other one I can think of on the top of my head right now is Caron Butler. But everybody else, I can't. It's hard for me to think. Yeah. So, anyways, the 96-97 season, it's going on. And he ends up trading for Tim Hardaway. Yeah, mid-season. He's like, you know what? We need another star. He realizes that the NBA is a two-star league. You need somebody else. Ends up getting the point guard from Golden State Warriors. All-star, running the TMC offense. That was running gun stuff. He was flashy. Has one of the greatest crossovers of all time because he doesn't carry the ball. There's some carriers out there in the basketball world. You guys know who you are. But he was the first really to perfect that crossover, make it nice and smooth, make you you can't react to it because he's already on the move. And then that was the beginning of the Pat Riley first duo era, the Alonzo Mourning Timmy era. And basically this whole era is built on trades. So in 97 offseason, we knew we didn't have enough, so we needed to get some more pieces, right? We end up trading for Jamal Mashburn. And holy moly, I'm sorry, this is actually the midseason still. I think it was also along with Tim Hardaway. You get Jamal Mashburn and a separate trade with Dallas Mavericks, and the kid before, in his rookie and sophomore year, was averaging 19 points and 24 points. And then we trade for him in his end of his third season because the Dallas Mavericks thought he was done. He got hurt. He only played a few games. He didn't look as sharp. We trade him. We trade some pieces of them that nobody cared about. And ends up being Jamal Mashburn being a really big role player. Basically, that was our big three. Jamal Mashburn, Tim Hardaway, Alonzo Mourning. And that was what we rode for a long time because we ended up filling that lineup with P.J. Brown and Dan Marley. And then we always had vets, some good vets in the background, in the bench. We had Vashawn Leonard, we had Terry Porter, we had Isaac Austin. The names go on and on and on because Pat Riley, all he did after getting his main five, Dan Marley, Tim Hardaway, Jamal Mashburn, P.J. Brown, Alonzo Mourning, just filled the bench with role players, veteran role players who've been there before, and hopefully they're ready to win a championship and help this starting five win a championship. And man, the closest we got was the Eastern Conference Finals in 97, and we lost to the Bulls, of course, who ended up winning the championship. And then after that, we kept losing to the Knicks over and over again. It was agony, agony. I hated it because we couldn't get away from it. I don't know what it was. The Knicks just kept beating us. We beat them the first time in 97, and then after that, they just kept smacking us in the face every first round. So all you Knicks fans, yeah, you got that one, I guess. But, Pat Riley never really changed the lineup up. It was always that starting lineup. And I think that's why I fell in love with the Heat, because it was the same team when I started watching the Heat. And I just put two and two together. I started watching the Heat when Pat Riley took over. And now, so I guess I've been a Pat Riley fan this whole time. But that's why I think I gravitated towards the team so much, because they weren't changing every year. I could just keep growing with them and keep seeing them get better and see what they do and see what they don't do. And then, as a fan, and you watch Fox Sports or whatever you're watching now, pregame, they do stories on the players, and you learn more and more and more, and it just makes you more and more invested in these players. And so I think that's the big reason. But unfortunately, we just couldn't get over the hump. Even though we're a good team, we're always, winning the Atlantic Division back then. We were always winning. We're always one of the top three teams in the East, so we were good. We weren't bad. We were putting up numbers. One of the best defensive teams out there in during those times. And for some reason, we just couldn't go over the hump. So because of that, Pat Riley goes, you know what? We need a lineup change. And I remember where I was. And this is why the Knicks hurt me, because Knicks kept hurting me. I guess New York kept hurting me, because I'm in New York that summer with my family, and I don't know what happened. I'm pretty sure I'm playing with my cousins and stuff, and then they all know I'm a Heat fan, and my cousin comes in, or my uncle comes in and goes, guess what? I'm like, what? The Heat just made a trade. And I'm like, you're lying. And then they're like, no, look. And honestly, they ended up trading, for Eddie Jones and Brian Grant. And I was like, what is going on here? And I honestly started crying, guys. Like, tears came out of my eyes because, I was so invested in those players. And I was young, so young at that time. I'm still like, what? This is elementary school still, maybe middle school. And no, this is middle school now, like 6th grade. And right before 6th grade started. And, I'm just like, man, this sucks. Like, I just lost my favorite players. Like, these are all my favorite players. Like, I didn't care about anybody else at the time in that league. I'm a kid still. All I know is the Heat. Like, for sure. That's all I'm following. No internet, no nothing like that. So the only thing I'm getting is a newspaper, and the newspaper, all they're gonna talk about is the Heat. So that's all I'm learning. That's all I'm doing. And it was heartbreaking. But little did I know is that we were getting Eddie Jones, Ricky Davis, Del Ellis, Anthony Mason, and in a separate trade, which was even almost bigger, we got Brian Grant from the Trailblazers. And that ushered in a new era, because even though we still had Timmy and Alonzo Mourning, they were getting older. Their bodies were failing them. Timmy was slowing down a lot, even though he played good still. Alonzo he got his kidney disease, so he was out of the lineup. And honestly, he didn't even play with this team really, because his kidney disease took over. He had to be out the whole season. He had to get the transplant, and it took him a while to get back. And he was never really the same after that, right? So this team never fulfilled its full potential, because the plan was to have Tim Hardaway, Eddie Jones at shooting guard, small forward, put Anthony Mason, and at the time you could put Anthony Mason up small forward, power forward Brian Grant, and center Alonzo Mourning. And if you don't know who Brian Grant, Eddie Jones are, guys, go look them up. Go look them up in Heat history. Go watch those highlights, because they're awesome. They're two of my favorite players of all time. I mean, I love Eddie Jones, and he was in the Heat, and he played for the Heat for a while. And Brian Grant as well. And, for me, that was another thing. This ends up being the new era, the Eddie Jones, Brian Grant era. Because eventually Tim Hardaway leaves, Alonzo Mourning leaves, Anthony Mason leaves. But I do want to say Anthony Mason, that one season with us from the trade, he was an all-star. He played awesome. He played big, because we had no Alonzo Mourning. And it was a steal trade, because we got Eddie Jones scoring a lot. We got Brian Grant being a huge, big man in the middle for us. Tim Hardaway still doing his thing when he can. And then Anthony Mason just has a career year. Like, he was going crazy. And he was in his 30s. Like, he was a 31-year-old person. So no one really thought it was going to happen. And he just came out of nowhere. And yes, he was a replacement all-star. But nonetheless, you can't take it away. He was an all-star. So it was pretty dope. And, that was one of my a favorite era of mine too, because this is when I'm growing up now. I'm going into high school. I grew up now in my middle school, high school years. I'm growing up with this Eddie Jones team and Brian Grant team, and I'm like, damn, this is awesome. And then my dad's working for the Heat now, so now I'm going to all the games, and experiencing Eddie Jones and Brian Grant on a daily, So I grew really invested in those guys. But again, look how he's growing the team with trades. Like, he ushered in the new era with the trade. Now, the new era that from the Eddie Jones and Brian Grant slowly bleeds into the Dwyane Wade. So now it's 0-3. We had a terrible season because Brian Grant was the only consistent person. Eddie Jones was in and out of the lineup. And then everybody else was a role player that, was okay. We had Caron Butler, but he was a rookie. We drafted Caron Butler. And that's like the only other guy I said in the draft that we can say that he was good, because he ends up being an all-star with the Wizards later in his career. But we ended up getting, Caron Butler 1 year. We had a good year. Then we ended up getting Dwyane Wade. But because of that Caron Butler pick, and he had such a strong year, and we had Eddie Jones, we had Brian Grant. So we didn't have a great year, but we had a pretty strong year. We actually got some free agent attention, and we ended up getting Lamar Odom, and then we got lucky in that draft. We ended up drafting Dwyane Wade in 03, and heading into the 03-04 season, we have a starting lineup of, Dwyane Wade, Eddie Jones, Caron Butler, Lamar Odom, and Brian Grant. Which like now, if you know basketball, that's a strong five. Like you think about it now, like damn, that was a pretty good five. And it was pretty good because we had Rafer Alston, Skip to my Lou in the background. This is my second favorite season of all time. Not because this season took over my favorite season of all time, but this was my second favorite season of all time, and it was awesome. Like I was there for all of it. I went to most of the games, and it was a blast. We were 41-41, and every night was a battle. And it was a battle to get to the playoffs, and it was a battle in the playoffs against the Hornets, against the Pacers. And it was just special because you see Dwyane Wade, this rising star, like kind of like Tyler Hero had. Like that was what Dwyane Wade was doing that year. He was showing flashes of being Dwyane Wade, of what we knew him now to the end of his career. And then Jimmy Butler was just he's getting better and better every game. Eddie Jones was still being Eddie Jones. Lamar Odom was just the right, perfect big man we needed. Could rebound, could pass, could look, can shoot, can do it all. And Pat Riley loved that. Like it was like one of the first stretch fours ever in the league. And then Brian Grant was just that man in the middle, just being an anchor. It was just the dopest thing. And we did so well that, again, Pat Riley ends up doing a trade to get the team better. He ends up trading Lamar Odom, Jimmy Butler, and Brian Grant for Shaquille O'Neal. And then this ushers in the Shaquille O'Neal and Dwyane Wade era. And as we know it, we had a championship out of it. But leading to that championship wasn't easy. So that 04-05 season, even though we got to the Eastern Conference Finals with Eddie Jones and Damon Jones as our point guard and some other guys, it wasn't enough. We just didn't have enough. Unfortunately, Dwyane Wade gets hurt. He couldn't play. We get knocked out. And then everyone looks and goes, you know what? We need some more help. So what does this guy do, Pat Riley? He ends up making one of the biggest trades in NBA history. All right. 5-team trade. Yes, a 5-team trade that involved 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 players. 13 players. And now look up the trade if you want. Just look up Antoine Walker trade to Miami, and you can see this whole big trade. But basically, the Heat end up getting Antoine Walker from the Celtics, Andre Emmett, James Posey, and Jason Williams from the Memphis Grizzlies, and that's it. That's all we get. But we get 3 big pieces to our championship. We got our point guard, Jason Williams. We got our small forward bench player, James Posey, who can lock down anybody, and then Antoine Walker, who's a clutch player, twinkle toes, has big games, was that key third role player really that can be that key third role player at nights when Dwyane Wade or Shaq wasn't having it. And look at that. And all we traded away was Eddie Jones and Russell Butler. That's all we traded away in some picks. Oh, and Quintel Woods, which if you guys don't remember Quintel Woods, don't worry about it. But it was just a junior college player that we drafted. And he was supposed to be good because he put in big numbers in junior college, but it just didn't end up being anything. But we ended up only trading Eddie Jones and Russell Butler. Yes, we had Russell Butler. We didn't know that. Russell Butler was on the Heat, and we drafted him with Jimmy Butler, and he was awesome. And rest in peace. But, Eddie, and that was another big hurt because now, I grew invested into Eddie Jones. I grew invested to Brian Grant, but, we got Shaq because I'm like, oh, we got Shaq now, so I shouldn't be too bad, I shouldn't be too sad about this because Shaq is coming to Miami. And then, of course, with this trade, I'm like, man, I don't know. Eddie Jones could have been it. And then, this is when Jason Williams already towards the downward spiral of his career. No one thought he was going to be that good. James Posey was James Posey. So everyone was like, oh, we got a good player, but is he better than Eddie Jones? No. And then Antoine Walker. And Antoine Walker was just coming off a bad, not a great season. Everyone thought he kind of lost it, which he was losing it, but he didn't lose it so bad at this point. But what I was failing to see was Eddie Jones was losing it too. So we ended up getting 3 really good players for us by losing 1 player. So it is what it is, but it was one of the smartest trades because guess what? We ended up winning the championship in 06, and all those players were huge in that whole run. I mean, each one of them had important roles, and they were key to our wins every time. As much as Dwyane Wade and Shaq were, these guys were just as important. And as always, Pat Riley mixed it in with a little bit of draft picks. Most of our draft picks never played, though, during this whole time. And then, unless your name is Jimmy Butler or Dwyane Wade. But most of it was signing veteran free agents to come and fill up the roles and make sure they were, we had everything filled up. So and you can see the lineup for that. But, unfortunately, it gets rocky after this, and Shaq and Dwyane Wade and everyone partied too much, and the 06-07 season wasn't great. And then leading into the 07-08 season, it wasn't that great either. Pat Riley and Shaq have friction. Pat Riley, really quick in that beginning of that season, ships off Shaquille O'Neal to the Phoenix Suns. He makes another trade to usher in another era of Heat basketball. And who do we usually trade for? Shawn Marion. Yep, the Matrix Shawn Marion, who still is one of my favorite players of all time. I mean, the guy was out of this world in his prime, and I was hoping, because at the back of the day, everyone thought that, Dwyane Wade, Shawn Marion pairing up, that's the new Jordan Wade and Jordan Pippen. That's the new Jordan Pippen now. Watch, that's a new combo. Good defense, good offense. The problem was, though, it was ugly basketball because Shawn Marion likes to play fast. He's coming from Phoenix, run and gun type style play, and we were slowing it down heavily, and he just couldn't get used to it. And he wasn't a great half court player. He wasn't a great dribbler. He wasn't a great off the ball shooter or anything like that. He was more about cuts and defense and transition and at being athletic. And unfortunately, our game plan just didn't really, flow with him. But, this is now the Dwyane Wade, Udonis Haslem era, because they're going to be the two players that are consistent throughout this whole era. So I'm going to call it that. But, so we start with Shawn Marion. It didn't work out. So basically, he only played 2 half seasons with us. He ends up playing the rest of the 07-08 season, but then in 08-09 and 09 mid-season, we end up trading him away. I'm sorry, no. Yeah, 08. This is 08 now. In the 08 season, mid-season, we end up trading him to Toronto Raptors for Jermaine O'Neal. So now we got a whole new O'Neal. We went from Shaq to Shawn Marion to Jermaine O'Neal. And if you didn't know who Jermaine O'Neal was, he was a big beast in Indiana in his career early on. He was a huge all-star. He can shoot, he can block, he can take it in. He had a good post game. He had everything. And then injuries just caught up with him. Knee injuries caught up to him. And he wasn't old when we got him. He was around 30, 31 years old. But he was just damaged goods at that moment, and he just unfortunately didn't have a lot left in the tank. But it's cool because we end up drafting Michael Beasley with our second pick and not Russell Westbrook or Kevin Love or anybody else in that draft. But whatever. We had him go to the playoffs, but that trade, that Jermaine O'Neal trade, guys, was Pat Riley setting up everything for the 2010 offseason, where we all know who was going to be a free agent. LeBron James, Chris Bosh. Can the Heat make enough room? And the Heat were not going to have enough room if they didn't trade Shawn Marion away, because Pat Riley did a good job with signing people. He was signing people only through the end of 2010. He wasn't signing anyone past 2010. Everyone we got was in a short contract. And then, but Shawn Marion had a big contract, so he traded for Jermaine O'Neal, and we needed a big guy because we just didn't have a big guy at this. It was bad through big guys, and we get our big man. He's gonna come off the books in 2010. We're gonna have money now. Let's see what happens. We still were competitive. I still enjoyed those years. I was hoping Michael Beasley would be something. Dwyane Wade was a beast. I mean, Dwyane Wade was having MVP seasons where I was really pissed off he didn't win MVP any of those seasons. I think he deserved it 100%. And whatever. What that attracts now is the 2010 offseason. We have the money. Who did we trade for? We traded for 2 players. Everyone thinks we signed these players, but actually we traded for these players. We ended up trading for LeBron James and Chris Bosh. So again, this guy, Pat Riley, brings in a new era of basketball with the Heat, with the trade, right? So, LeBron James, Chris Bosh, and Dwyane Wade usher in the Big 3 era, and we win 2 championships out of 4 seasons, and throughout that whole thing, when you think about it, we never made a really big trade during that whole 4 years. Everything was drafts or free agent signings. So that was that big pickup from a trade. for that era. And I mean, we all enjoyed it. We all partied a lot. We all remember that. Good memories, good memories. So a couple years passes. Of course, it's 2015 now. LeBron left last year. Chris Bosh is there still, Dwyane Wade. And I was gonna call this era the Dwyane Wade, Chris Bosh era, but I can't because Chris Bosh ends up getting hurt the whole time. But because we trade for who? We make another trade. And it's for Goran Dragic. And that was gonna be the new big three. Chris Bosh, Dwyane Wade, and Goran Dragic, right? And it looked pretty good to me, honestly. You know, the NBA was going towards a new guard play, system. So to have two elite guards and one big that was elite could have been really good. I mean, I think honestly, if Chris Bosh wouldn't have gotten injured and gotten sick, we'd probably be looking at a new team right now, a different Heat team. But things happen, and then this ends up being the Goran Dragic era because with Dwyane Wade, the Goran Dragic, Dwyane Wade era, and we end up making the playoffs a couple of times. Dwyane Wade leaves briefly, comes back, and it was fun to watch. I mean, I think just plans fell there, but it was supposed to be something different. The Pat Riley thought he was going to have Chris Bosh. Pat Riley thought he was going to have Dwyane Wade and Goran Dragic and be able to build around these guys and put the right pieces around to make sure we always stay competitive. And I think 100% we would have, and we could have been top 3 every year, I believe, in the East. 100%. But because of all that, it ends up winding down that we end up doing the Dwyane Waiters thing, Hassan Whiteside thing, and all that stuff. And as you see, I don't want to call it an era. Those were just brief seasons of those things, because it was every year we played differently. Every year it was a different, roster where Coach Spo was trying to figure out how do you maximize this roster, how do you maximize that roster, and he had to keep changing the game plan every year. And that just is a nod to Coach Spo, though, how great of a coach he is, that no matter who he has in his roster, he's going to change it and make sure he's bringing out the best out of them in defense and in offense. So, Coach Spo, guys, Coach Spo. But whatever, we go through a couple years of purgatory, and what does Pat Riley do? I think we all do this. We all end up realizing we go through cycles in our life, and the only way you go out of a cycle is if you go the other way, one time. And I think that's what he tried to do with the signings of, Dwyane Waiters and James Johnson and all these other big contracts that everyone hated and did not agree with. He was thinking that he will try something else, and maybe you build a young team and they build together, and it will be similar to that Alonzo Mourning first team he had, where they kind of, the starting 5 stayed together and they were going to get better, and you just fill in what's everyone behind them. But unfortunately, it just didn't work out that way because of injuries and certain players and attitudes and everything like that, and it just didn't work out. And that leads us to 2019 now, and I think you guys know where I'm going with this. And we end up trading for Jimmy Butler, and there's Dwyane Wade, and then there's Pat Riley again. Pat Riley with no cap space, and no one thought realistically we can get Jimmy Butler because of that. He ends up pulling the impossible to start his new era and make sure we stay competitive again through a trade. So he goes back to what he knows best. What he does best is make trades, and he trades Josh Richardson away, unfortunately, because we did really good in the draft. The last couple of seasons we've been really great, and that's allowed us to trade players away and get better players away. And one of them now is Jimmy Butler, and now that ends up becoming the Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo era. And I don't want to put Goran Dragic in that era because we don't know if he's gonna stay. But we might put Tyler Hero in that era. The Tyler Hero, Jimmy, and Bam might be the big 3 of the next. Maybe Pat Riley decides to go with it and then trade to build around those 3. Maybe. We don't know yet. We got to see what he does when he's allowed to. But it just shows you what he did. And he did that this past offseason. Right before the shutdown, who's he trade? He makes another trade. He trades away our Justice Winslow, who was another draft pick of ours that we were building and has potential, and hopefully it works out for him. We trade him for Andre Iguodala and Jay Crowder, who for sure we all know were a huge reason why we went to the NBA Finals and was able to compete in that NBA Finals and win 2 games. It was because of those 2 guys. Jay Crowder was power forward basically for our whole run in the playoff bubble. And then Andre Iguodala was just a solid, consistent force of veteran presence that we needed. And Pat Riley knew that, and he got it through a trade. He did it through a trade, and it just shows, again, I just want to highlight, he does this stuff. He builds the right role players. So either he's going to get anyway he's going to get a superstar, or he's going to get a role player that's going to be by a trade. He ain't going to do it by signing. And I believe that wholeheartedly too. If next summer we end up getting Giannis, it'll be through a trade, really. It won't be through a straight up signing. It'll be through a trade somehow to make sure we maximize our cap space as well. Because if we do a signing trade with them, and we'll just say, Milwaukee will give you this first round pick and these couple second rounders or whatever, or maybe we'll trade for some picks this year. Like, this brings me to the draft now. I think we trade out of the first round. Guys, if we don't make a trade on draft night, do not fall in love with who we draft. Please, do not fall in love with who we draft. I have a really strong feeling we're going to trade this pick away. Unless somebody really falls in our lap, like someone with huge potential that we really, really feel that can come in the Heat and really be a big thing. But guys, I can't see a rookie being great this year. Like, I think rookie of the year is going to be given to a 12-point scorer, because you're relying on a kid to get drafted on November 18th and then be ready to play an NBA game on December 22nd. Like, let's get real, guys. These kids aren't going to be any good next year. They're going to show flashes. They'll have moments of themselves being really good. But consistently all year being good, no way, no how. I don't care what you say. They're all going to suck most of the time. So I think we just trade out of it and we pick a player in the second round. Like, we trade into the second round and pick a player with potential, and then we keep them. Because all the second round players we can sign at non-guaranteed contracts, which lets us stay flexible for 2021. But if we get a first round pick, we have to pay that player for 2 seasons, which eats up 2021 cap space. We can't do that. If y'all were watching my last video, if you haven't, please go back. I clearly say this next, show you guys on the salary cap table how that happens. So I think we're gonna trade out of that first. We're gonna trade this first round pick, and I think we might trade it for a role player that's gonna build around this. The Pat Riley might do this. Now, also, we gotta be aware of the other trades he's made. You have to lose some talent to get some talent. Even though we got Antoine Walker, Jason Williams, and James Posey, we lost Eddie Jones. Even though we got Andre Iguodala and Jay Crowder, we ended up losing Justice Winslow. And if he ends up being really good, we can look back at that trade and be like, damn, we lost Justice Winslow for Andre Iguodala and Jay Crowder. Especially if Jay Crowder walks this offseason, and especially if Iggy ends up declining on us. It's gonna look like they won the trade because we didn't end up winning a championship because of it. So something to pay attention to. But I think, guys, I really did this video to really congratulate Pat Riley, if anything, and the Heat organization on the great trades they've done in franchise history. But also let you guys realize that this is what Pat Riley does. This is how he makes our team better most of the time. And you should expect it and believe that's going to work out for the best, because he usually does for us most of the time. And I would say right now, guys, I think the top trade people that we might trade is Duncan Robinson and Kendrick Nunn and Kelly Olynyk. And I would say Andre Iguodala is still a possibility to get traded. Tyler Hero, though, I really do think that Pat Riley wants to see how far this kid can grow for at least one more season. And maybe that ends up being our big 3. And if that ends up being the big 3 for him, that's great, because then we'll have so much cap space to build around them. And yeah, we might not need to get Giannis. Maybe he realizes, okay, we get this big man, we can get this point guard, and we get this bench player. That would be great to fill out these 3 guys and maximize their best. So just be ready. Just be ready. All right. I had fun. I like talking about the Heat history. I like looking back and discussing, some great moments and some, and for me it was some great heartbreaking moments, because like I said, I cried when we traded away Jamal Mashburn and PJ Brown. So, I grew invested, and I get if you guys have grown invested in some of these guys, even if it's been only a year or 2 or 3, because I get it, especially if you just started watching it. Like, I get it. That's how you kind of make yourself a fan. You latch on to one player or a couple of players, and you kind of just root for them, and then you end up rooting for the whole team, and you realize you're just this big fan, and then you know what it is. You get invested, and so I get it. But just remember, you gotta stay fluid. It's a business at the end of the day. But no matter what, I know Pat Riley and our team will put us in the best position to be the best team we can be and compete for a championship. So let's wish Pat Riley and the boys the best. One more week until the draft. Let's see what happens. I'll be back on Friday with a new episode. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for watching. Again, please share, subscribe, like, follow. Facebook and Twitter at HeatBlockSpot. Email me, heatblogspot@gmail.com. All right, everybody. I'm MA. I'm out. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been great. Have a great night. Deuces.